Hello and good evening, everyone. My name is April Finley, and I am the Assistant Site Manager at the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum. I am excited to welcome you all tonight to our virtual programming for Women's History Month 2026. So today we have a lot to talk through. So I want to make sure that we set the scene, we set the stage for everything that's going to take place. Now, before we get super started, I want to ensure that you all can hear me well. Please put in the chat if you all can hear. If the chat's not working for you, please use the Q&A. Please let me know that you all can hear me okay, because I want to make sure of that before if I need to switch to headphones. Okay, perfect. So we are good to go. Thank you all so much. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to the second program in our new learning series, Palmer Presents. This series will consist of in-person and virtual learning experiences for anyone who is interested in learning more about Dr. Brown, Palmer, and many other topics. Today, we are going to venture into the virtual salon for the first time. And no, not the salon where you get your hair and your nails done, but the historical salon where meetings of the minds took place. Folks across historical periods gathered in homes and in other spaces to discuss relevant topics and debate solutions to the problems of their day. Our virtual salon in this series will play host to audiences learning from and discussing various topics with modern scholars. Today, we bring you Salon Conversations, Margaret Murray Washington, the club woman. Washington was born enslaved in 1861 in Macon, Mississippi. By 1895, she was married to the twice widowed race leader Booker T. Washington and joined to the ranks of the rising black middle class. This program, led by Dr. Sheena Harris Hayes, author of Margaret Murray Washington, The Life and Times of a Career Clubwoman, will explore Washington's transformational leadership as an active clubwoman, an educational reformer, and integral partner to her husband and his success at the Tuskegee Institute. Now, before we get started, here's our little housekeeping. We are in Zoom webinar. You will not have access to your cameras or to your microphones during this program, but you are more than welcome to engage with us in the chat. If you have any questions during the program, please put those in the Q&A box separately. It's a little bit easier for us to kind of distill down what's being asked and how we are going to be able to answer it. And both of those are located down at the bottom of your screen. We will address most of the questions towards the end of the program, but throughout, if there are things that can be answered, we will do that and either send it privately or publicly to you all. We will address those questions, the majority of them, like I said, at the end of the program. This session is also being recorded and will be later posted to the Charlotte Hawkins Brown YouTube page at a later date. So here's just a quick little agenda of what we are going to talk about today, because I'm going to be before you a little bit, but I'm going to try not to be before you long. All right. So background info on what we are and what we do. This is just a tad bit of history about Dr. Brown and the Palmer Memorial Institute. Palmer Memorial Institute was founded in October of 1902 by 19-year-old Charlotte Hawkins Brown, who was also a native of North Carolina. She had been teaching in the Sedalia community for about a year at Bethany Institute, which was a local church school run at Bethany Church by the American Missionary Association. At the end of the 1901-1902 school year, Bethany Institute was closed due to the AMA's lack of funding. Dr. Brown returned to Cambridge, Massachusetts, which is where she grew up, to fundraise for another educational facility in Sedalia. She received help for this endeavor from Miss Alice Freeman Palmer, who was a bigwig in the educational spaces up there. At the end of the summer, Dr. Brown raised enough to purchase a two-story blacksmith shop where she began her school. Over the years, Palmer Memorial Institute grew in size, student and land-wise. By the 1940s, there were stately brick buildings all across the campus, cottages that housed Dr. Brown and teachers, a campus snack shop, and a teaching farm, and plus quite a few other things. Students came from all over the United States, and some came from international locations to be educated under the tutelage of the First Lady of Social Graces. The school's curriculum reflected Dr. Brown's ideals of knowing the correct thing to do, to say, and to wear in many social situations. Students dressed up for dinner each night, practiced how to engage in polite conversation, and learn how to entertain others through the school's focus on social graces. As her school grew, so did Dr. Brown's civic engagement. She was active in the Sedalia Homeowners Association, which she also founded, the North Carolina Teachers Association, which she served as president for in the 1930s, the YWCA, where she sat on the national board, and the North Carolina Federation of Colored Women's Clubs, which she also founded. Now, these are just a few. It's a lot. A lot. That lady was busy. Much of her activism came from involvement in these various organizations. This took her all over the place to give speeches and to interact with other club women. And this is how we can place a link to Margaret Murray Washington. Black women across the country have begun to organize locally, creating women's clubs, organizations, and publications, but because they were largely excluded from white women's politics and underrepresented in larger conversations about racial politics at the end of the 19th century. Gains from the earlier post Civil War Reconstruction period began to shrink rapidly. Lynchings had reached an all time high by the late 1800s, and Southern states were actively disenfranchising Black voters. Through the coalition building around women's clubs, Black women created a structure in which they could play a more active role in women's and racial politics. The clubs supported Black women's roles in their homes and in greater society. Now, that's enough context. Whew, for tonight's conversation. And now on to the main event. Today, we are going to be hearing from Dr. Sheena Harris Hayes. And I'm gonna put in my interjection before I give the full bio. Dr. Harris was one of my professors during my college career, and Dr. Harris did a lot of making history relatable. So she was one of the first people that made history feel really, really cool in my life. So I am honored to have her here sharing with us today. Now, on to the actual bio. Dr. Sheena Harris Hayes is an associate professor of history at Auburn University. She holds a PhD in history from the University of Memphis, a Master of Arts, and a Bachelor of Science, both earned from Florida A&M University. Go Rattlers. Throughout her career, Hayes has held academic appointments at Austin Peay State University, West Virginia University, and Tuskegee University, where she served as an associate professor of history and the inaugural director of student engagement initiatives. That's where we became acquainted. Her book, Margaret Murray Washington, The Life and Times of a Career Club Woman, explores Washington's influential role as a co-founder of numerous Black women's clubs, notably the National Association of Colored Women. As the third wife of Booker T. Washington, she also made significant contributions to the early development of Tuskegee University, serving as the Dean of Women and leading community organizer. Hayes' research is extensive. She is a volume editor for the 2027 Cambridge Study on Black Women's History and a co-editor for the second volume of Blacks in Appalachia, a forthcoming sequel to the 1985 Blacks in Appalachia published by William Turner. She recently published Beyond Booker T. Washington, Fannie Smith, Olivia A. Davidson, and the Tuskegee Normal School for Colored Teachers, and is currently writing a book on Olivia American Davidson Washington. If y'all can't tell, we love Miss Olivia Davidson down at Tuskegee. Booker T. Washington's second wife and the co-founding principal of Tuskegee Normal School for Colored Teachers. Hayes is also a U.S. Army veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to move on out your way. And you all can hear from the fabulous Dr. Sheena Harris Hayes.
Listen, if you could see my tears while you were talking, thank you for that warm welcome. It is a privilege to be in community with you this evening as we explore the phenomenal journey and legacy of Margaret Murray Washington. Thank you, April Finley, who I hold deep to my heart. Thank you, Tanisha Anthony, and the entire crew for inviting me to the Palmer Institute. It's truly an honor to be a part of the amazing work that you are doing here. I want to take some time this evening to share the story of Margaret Washington, who I was formally introduced to through the writings of Jacqueline Ann Rouse more than 2 decades ago. It's wild. While my research was already focused on examining the daily, unassuming lives of Black women prior to that encounter, Washington's impact profoundly shaped my trajectory. This evening, we will explore key moments of her 64-year journey and the lasting impact she made on education and racial uplift. This is how the story will unfold. I will begin by exploring how Washington was formally recognized at the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame. I will then provide a brief overview of my book, followed by a short narrative of Washington's life. Afterwards, we will continue our conversation together through questions and more dialogue, giving you sort of that salon feel. All right, so starting in 1970, the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame recognized trailblazing women throughout Alabama. 2 years after it was founded and 47 years after her death, on October 4th, 1972, Margaret Murray Washington of Tuskegee, Alabama, was inducted into the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame. The installation ceremony took place in Marion, Alabama, at the all-girls campus of Judson College and in the spacious Herrick Chapel. What you see here is a copy of the program, and as you can observe, the award was installed by Tuskegee Institute's fourth president, Dr. Luther H. Foster. Among the attendees, among the attendees of the Alabama Women's Hall, among the attendees were the Alabama Women's Hall of Fame board members, including Minnie Gaston, a graduate of Tuskegee Institute and wife of business magnate Arthur George Gaston. Now, although Dr. Foster, who was the president of Tuskegee, installed the honor, it is important to mention that the idea came from Minnie Gaston, pictured here with her husband, as she initiated the petition that led to Margaret Washington's selection as the first ever inductee of African descent. Like Washington, Minnie Gaston was also a clubwoman. And as a charter member of the Birmingham chapter of the National Council of Negro Women, Gaston penned the petition that made clear that her own journey to service leadership would not have been possible had it not been for the reform and racial uplift work of Margaret Murray Washington. And I quote, Mrs. Washington was 100 years ahead of her time, proclaimed Gaston. What a pity Alabama and the nation did not see the value of her work 75 years ago. Isn't that usually how it goes? Now, as I stated earlier, when I was first introduced to Margaret Washington 20 years ago, I was but a budding graduate student who had read countless studies about male institution leaders. And I often pondered, where are the Black women? I became increasingly curious about who the women were beside the powerful men. How did they define womanhood? What motivated them to create organizations? Did the tenets of respectability politics enlarge their realm of influence or shrink it? My book on Margaret Murray Washington, The Life and Times of a Career Clubwoman, is the first biography of Washington. It chronicles her life from the trenches of slavery to her later works as an activist, reformer, educator, leading club woman. My biography reconstructs Washington's life by finding her voice and resisting the urge to redeem her. By embracing rather than papering over the questionable elements of Margaret's lived experience, I offer a nuanced and multi-layered approach to her story and to Black women's history. I argue that Margaret Washington's life and work magnify possibilities for alliances that remain implicit in resistance to all forms of repression, and the centrality of the Black Women's Club movement's intersectional praxis to affect social and political change. I used a wide range of sources to recover Washington's voice. I analyzed personal papers, court records, petitions, school records, military files, newspapers, photographs, novels, autobiographies that I collected from various archives in the United States, West Africa, and Haiti. So, how does Margaret's story begin? Margaret Maggie, as she was affectionately known by family members, James Murray was born on Saturday, March 9th, 1861, in Macon, Mississippi. to Lucy Murray, an enslaved domestic worker from Georgia, and James Murray, a railroad worker from Ireland. It's unclear if the two were legally married, but they had at least one child before Margaret's birth. By the age of 7, Margaret's father had passed, and she was informally adopted by a Quaker brother and sister, known as the Quakers. They later moved to Nashville, Tennessee, where, after taking her teaching exam, Margaret started to teach as early as the age of 14. In 1881, Margaret enrolled in Fisk University's preparatory school as a part-time student. It would take her about 8 years to complete her studies. During her time at Fisk, she also befriended fellow classmate W.E.B. Du Bois. The two worked together as investigative journalists, as he was the editor-in-chief and Margaret was an executive editor of the school's newspaper, the Fisk Herald. Her time at Fisk provided a more liberal perspective of gender and class responsibilities, as the student body was co-ed and consistently debated new ideas of the New South and the place of Blacks within that new culture. After working at the Fisk Herald for 5 years, Margaret graduated with the class of 1889. And I couldn't help but to have this picture because it just brings in the emotion of like, this is how we entered into the space. In attendance at her graduation was the young and recently widowed Booker T. Washington. It was customary for Washington, who was the founding principal of Tuskegee Institute, to attend HBCU programming for recruitment purposes. While he didn't give the keynote address, he did give a brief talk following the keynote. And as fate had it, he was seated at the table across from Margaret, who we know had inquired about a teaching position at Tuskegee months earlier. However, Booker T. Washington did not respond. After meeting Margaret and during her graduation ceremony, Booker offered her a position as an English teacher. She accepted. The position would soon evolve into that of Lady Principal and then Dean of Women. At the time of their first meeting, Booker had been widowed twice and fathered three small children, daughter Portia from his first marriage to Fannie Norton Smith, and two sons, Booker Jr. and Ernest Davidson from his second marriage to Olivia America Davidson. Shortly after arriving to the Tuskegee campus, Margaret began a public relationship with Booker. The young principal was born on April 5th, 1865, in Hales Ford, Virginia. He graduated from Hampton University and went on to work various teaching jobs. In 1881, the same year that Margaret enrolled in Fisk University, Booker became the founding principal at Tuskegee Normal School for colored teachers. The school would go through a series of name changes through the early years. The one that primarily was the name during Margaret's time was Tuskegee Institute. Margaret quickly settled into life as an English teacher and later a fiancée to Booker. And in less than 3 years at the Institute, Booker and Margaret married. Now, Margaret's marriage to Booker changed her status immediately. She became a mother and a public face to women and children's reforms. And while she was often considered the mother of Tuskegee and performed many other mothering type of services, her role as stepmother was not without its challenges. In addition, Margaret and Booker would bear no biological children together. They would, however, adopt Margaret's niece and nephew in later years. Now, at this point in her life, Margaret Washington had proven herself to be a masterful organizer and fundraiser. Shortly after joining the faculty at Tuskegee, she worked to professionalize the girls' curriculum. She understood that the quality and usefulness of the curriculum directly impacted the lives of the women in the city and throughout the state. Just as she had done as a student at Fisk, Washington expanded the realms of her leadership to include the larger community. The Mothers' Meeting was created in 1893 and inspired by the first Tuskegee Negro Conference held in February of 1892. Booker invited rural farmers and their families to Tuskegee to discuss their unique place within the Southern economy. Margaret noticed that Black women who attended the conference were not represented on the program. Margaret soon changed that for future attendees, ensuring that the women and children had or saw their place within that larger conference. Then in 1895, Margaret formed the Tuskegee Women's Club, a more exclusive club of faculty, administrators, and wives of the Institute. Later in 1895, Washington co-founded and presided over the National Federation of Colored Women's Clubs. And we can talk about the story of how how the Colored Women's League was also a club that was around at that time period. In 1896, she co-founded the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, and Margaret would preside over the NACW from 1912 to 1916, making education and the Negro home her greatest priorities. Under the umbrella of the NACW, she created the Southern Federation of Women's Clubs and the Alabama State Federation of Women's Clubs. It's important to note that Margaret's club work extended beyond merely establishing clubs. And as you can see, she established a lot. She institutionalized them. One initiative occurred at the turn of the century. In her quote, she says, "It is everywhere conceded that children arrested for small offenses and thrown among hardened criminals are not helped. This no longer can persist," stated Margaret in 1907. It was also in 1907 that Margaret, along with three other women, went before the court in Birmingham to request that the small boys who came before the courts be placed in their care. The court consented, provided that the club women show proof that they had facilities and an individual willing to direct the children. Nearly 12 months after the visit, the Mount Meigs Reformatory for Juvenile Negro Lawbreakers was created. Margaret worked with women of the Alabama Federation of Colored Women, most notably Josephine Washington of Montgomery and Cornelia Bowen of Mount Meigs, who would become the principal of the Mount Meigs Reformatory, to organize the initiative. The collaboration between Margaret Washington and the other club women ensured the success of the reformatory. Now, the Mount, as it was called by the youth, provided the boys with kindergartens, playgrounds, trades, reading courses, and sports. Lessons were given on proper ways to brush teeth and the necessity of baths. These routines were done to instill personal pride and to elevate their self-esteem. They were also part of a larger joint effort to correct the injustices committed against Black youth who were routinely robbed of childhoods. These efforts were also done to see an end to the convict lease system. In 1911, after numerous petitions from Washington, the state of Alabama took charge of the reformatory for boys. The club women still developed the lessons and the day-to-day activities, but the state took over the upkeep and maintenance. And so here on this image, you see a group of boys that are playing baseball, and it really is showing the continuation of the reformatory even after Margaret Washington's 1925 death. Finally, in 1922, Washington stepped away from the domestic initiatives of the NACW to create the International Council of Women of the Darker Races. Although short-lived, the organization connected African American women to international partnerships in Haiti, in Cuba, and in West Africa. After her husband's death in 1915, Margaret Washington continued their mission of helping to uplift the race, but nearly a decade later, she too became very ill. On June 4th, 1925, with her adopted daughter Laura by her side, Margaret Murray Washington died in her home in Tuskegee, Alabama. She was later buried in Tuskegee next to her husband, Booker T. Washington. So it is difficult to conceptualize the complete life and club work of an activist like Margaret Washington. Amongst her many accomplishments, education, club work, and the Negro home remained her greatest accomplishments. She used her work with the Tuskegee Women's Club as a blueprint to organizing women at the local level, regional, national, and international levels. Margaret used her resources not only to improve the plight of African American women, but towards creating opportunities for Black youth. She was a prolific educator and international humanitarian whose life illuminates the experiences of a Southern reformer who came of age during the Jim Crow South. Now, Now, the work that was being done in the South by Black club women and in the South by Black club women and male leaders was spread through various channels across the nation. What we learn is that Charlotte Hawkins Brown was first learned of the educational work being done in the South in 1897 when Booker T. Washington gave a lecture at Boston's Ebenezer Baptist Church titled The Negro in the South. She was only 14 at this time. By 1915, Brown had positioned herself as a mentee to both Booker and Margaret Washington, as she had visited their homes at Tuskegee on several occasions. Even further, prior to his 1915 death, Booker endorsed Brown's Palmer Memorial Institute. For Brown, this endorsement ensured Palmer would receive resources from benefactors and philanthropists alike. Margaret Washington and Brown both understood the challenges of running a school and of concealing progressive intent from white philanthropists. There are a number of instances where Brown would make pamphlets and sort of show the low parts of the race as opposed to showing many of the advancements that were made as well, and the need for like-minded Black sisterhood. Margaret Washington, just as her husband had, supported Brown's efforts at the Palmer Institute. 22 years her senior, the two often communicated via letters, which included discussions about building funds, the state of the race, school talk, and the latest gossip. In a letter to Brown in November of 1918, Washington commented on Brown's recent building fund after experiencing a loss of a building due to a fire, and shared her own challenges in restoring buildings on the campus of Tuskegee. The letters provided advice, support, and reinforced their shared commitment to networking and sisterhood. In 1918, as the war to end all the wars was coming to an end, Margaret also expressed to Brown her hope that African American women would be a leading force in the South, helping solve the great race problem. Through these letters and in-person visits, the women built a lasting friendship where they shared resources, experiences, networks, and their commitment to racial uplift. Thank you.
Give it up. Y'all give it up for Dr. Sheena Harris Hayes. Okay, that incredible. Y'all, I am okay. So I've mentioned this before, but I don't think we have the exact same crew that we had last time. So I am a graduate of Tuskegee University, TU. And Dr. Harris, like I said before, was one of my professors while I was there. I gave tours across campus all 5 years I was there. I learned 1,000 new things in just this brief talk. My goodness. You can tell that your work is well researched, well thought through, and the way you laid it out is just, it's logical. It makes so much sense. It just makes so much sense and it makes it very easy to follow. Makes it very, very easy to follow. So thank you, thank you, thank you so much for all the work that you have done to shed more light on Margaret Murray Washington, who is just a remarkable individual. Like I said, I learned so much more in this session just about who she was, how she operated, and about her early life, which I had absolutely no context for. So thank you.
No, and thank you for allowing me to be able to share it. I think that one of the things that I'm always going back to is like how I was introduced to Margaret. And just like a quick story of it is that I'm reading Jacqueline Ann Rouse's article. And in her article, it's saying Mrs. Booker T. Washington, Mrs. Booker T. Washington, Mrs. Booker T. Washington Fanny, Mrs. Booker T. Washington Olivia, Mrs. like, okay, like who are all these women? And so I think it really just drew me, not just that his wives have a lot of names, all of them, but that they all have just such fascinating stories. And it was just by fate that I started with Margaret Washington as well.
I love that. So there is just again so much that we can get into about these club women and what they were doing in this early 1900s. So can you kind of set the stage for the environment in which Margaret Murray Washington was creating the Tuskegee Women's Clubs and founding her national organization as well?
Absolutely. So one of the things that you know is that where Tuskegee is situated,
Mhm.
right? And so just a little going back a little bit, Margaret is born enslaved and her mother is also born enslaved as well.
Mhm.
But her father is a white Irishman who's presumably free. And so, even Margaret's early years, you see that her mother is politically savvy and she's always setting her daughters up for success. And so, when there's opportunities, you see Margaret's mother really placing her in positions to be able to take advantage of those opportunities. And one of them was to continue her education in Nashville.
Okay.
And so, one of the things that we also know is that many of these early schools that educated Black youth were doing so without much resources. And they're doing so with a wish and a hope and an idea of what freedom is and what freedom means. And very similarly, that's how Margaret is entering into the classroom, right? And so she's going to these small schools and she's getting very basic education. And with that basic education, she's able to take what is considered a exam
Mhm.
to be able to teach classes, but she's 14, right? And so she's rather young while she enters into the classroom. But one of the things that you see is that these women are thinking in the terms of where there is not, we are going to place something there until there is, right? And so you continuously see this sort of filling the gaps in places or in ways in which you would not necessarily think, why would you care about a book if you can't afford to buy new clothes? Or why would you care about reading a book if we can't eat, right? But all of these things are happening at the same time. And so to bring us to this point where now Margaret has left Fisk and just a little background of Fisk. So while she's at Fisk as well, she's an investigative journalist, which means that she's not just at Fisk for 8 years in the classroom reading a book,
Mhm.
she's literally outside, right? Like how we were outside after COVID, she was outside,
I love
literally.
it. I love it.
She is literally outside. And when she's outside, she is going to these schools and going to
Mhm.
these, what you would consider to be early foundational schools. And not just going and writing about, oh, this is what the school did, but she's going as a promoter. So she's writing about it to solicit help. And then she's going back to these schools to take back what she's gotten, right? And to bring awareness to what is happening at these schools. And so the things that she's going to do when she gets to Tuskegee, she's been doing them, and Tuskegee just provides this sort of nestled space for her to really be able to take what she was already doing and go with it. And so one of
Mm.
the things that we see is that she is building onto the legacy that Fannie Smith was doing while she was at Tuskegee,
Mhm.
that Olivia Davidson is bringing her pedagogy to Tuskegee. When Margaret gets to Tuskegee, she's sort of falling into step of what is it that I can do that's going to be my niche. And
Okay.
hers was the Negro home. And so that
Okay.
automatically is going to place her into professionalizing
Mhm.
what folks are doing on campus and
Mhm.
also professionalizing and thinking about what folks are doing in the community. And that was a long-winded way of saying set up the space, right? But it's this notion that this woman is accustomed kind of to this idea of filling in the gap.
I love that. Something that I'm also from Birmingham, by the way,
Mhm,
for
mhm,
everybody out there. And I talk about this all the time when y'all come to the museum. Arthur George Gaston is our guy
mhm,
in that city. One of the things that we learned about him at the Civil Rights Institute was that he had this knack for
mhm,
doing the very same thing,
mhm,
for seeing a need in the Black
mhm,
community and filling
mhm,
it. And that's how a lot of his businesses came
mhm.
to fruition. The insurance company, who was named after
Yes.
Booker T.
Booker T.
Washington.
Washington.
Come
Mhm,
on. And Miss
mhm,
Minnie
mhm.
worked at the school, which I believe also
Absolutely.
was Booker T.
Booker T.
Washington.
Washington, yes.
Yes. That's how my mom got to know her.
Mhm,
And then there's also like the Smith and Gaston Funeral Home that they founded. So many businesses throughout that city
mhm,
have that same kind of, this is what we needed.
mhm.
I'm going to make sure it
You do
happens.
it. Yeah,
And that spirit, knowing that that's kind of, maybe that's something that Miss Minnie recognized in Margaret Murray Washington and what
absolutely.
maybe prompted her recommendation to the Alabama Hall of Women. Is
Absolutely.
there any more that you know about kind of how she came to that decision to recommend her for that recognition?
I think it was really one of the things that you kind of see in the ways that she writes it up
Hmm.
is this idea of I went to Tuskegee and Tuskegee loves them some Olivia, right?
And
But
do. And do.
But Margaret, she is just like she's the one that's there when Booker is gone, right? And she's the one that's carrying on that legacy. But it's this internalized. We're not going to forget
Yeah.
about what happened with Olivia and how through Olivia's funding we're able to still be here. And what I get from Minnie is sort of this idea that yes, in the ways in which we think about the club work and the ways that we think about Booker T. Washington's ideas being institutionalized outside of this space of
Hmm.
Tuskegee, Alabama. It's impossible not to think about Margaret Washington, right? When we think about these organizations that are connecting us in ways that we kind of are connected with social media in a way, like they're connecting these women that you would not necessarily think would be connected
Right.
in ways that is revolutionary. And at the head of that is
Hmm.
Margaret. And so it was almost like a no-brainer in the sense of who, where, how, yes. And so that's really what it was. And everything was a fight. So it was not just, I think we should, it was no, we are going to. And she was on the board as well. And so her voice and what she said really mattered.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm trying to connect all the things as we go through our questions. That's why I'm looking here and making waves and
Mhm.
whatnot. But thinking of all of the wives of Booker T. Washington, that
Mhm.
leads us to one of our questions.
Mhm. Um,
In the Q&A. So if you all have not seen already, there is a Q&A down at the bottom of your screen. If you have any questions for Dr. Harris, please drop those down in there. And so the first one comes from Brittany Lane, who is one of the best people on the planet. Brittany, I'm going to expose all your business. I'm so sorry, girl. Used to work down at Tuskegee
Hi,
at the George
Brittany.
Washington Carver Museum there, and knows so much about that history. She is a phenomenal superintendent at the Harriet Tubman Historic Site up in New York. So she is killing the game in the history streets. Brittany, thank you so much for coming. She has a question for you. She says, wonderful presentation. Have you ever given thought to writing a single book highlighting each of the three wives of Booker T. Washington? As you mentioned previously, it's refreshing to hear the stories of how Black women were leaders and supported their communities in their own right.
Absolutely. And yes, and I'll say this. I'll say that when I was introduced to the three wives,
Hmm.
it archivally, it made sense to go with Margaret because Margaret is living longer. Margaret has more of what we would consider to be an archive. And I can go into this whole thing about Black women and Black folk within the silences of archives, especially those that are born in this institution of slavery, right? This time period. And so, because of that, it made sense to start with Margaret because it was just more sources. Then it was, yeah, but their stories have to be told too. And so that's when I went back and did the article on Olivia and on Fanny together. And
Okay.
while doing the article on Olivia and Fanny together, and then it was like, wait, there is a lot on Olivia, right? In order to construct it in the ways that you have to think about the archives, just really kind of make it fun
Hmm.
because there isn't a singular archive that says Olivia America Davidson Washington's papers are here, right?
Uh-huh.
Which makes it challenging. But
Yes.
what is there is her connections. And so building out this story is really how I was able to build out the article on Olivia, is really through her connections and her connections, not just through her ways of paying for schools,
Hmm.
right? But also her way of ensuring that Tuskegee is going to be able to withstand any drought that it went through. And so those connections build out who Olivia America Davidson was. And so to answer your question, yes, I have thought about it. And so the next book that I am doing is on Olivia America Davidson and thinking about her as this philanthropist and thinking about her as this community leader and institution builder. The one on Fanny, that it may be easier once I start doing more of the investigative work on Olivia.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it really just is the state of building out the archives, which is both and fun.
Yeah, but necessary work because
Oh,
just like you said,
it's
it needs to be
a-
done.
Absolutely. It's absolutely necessary work. And if anyone is in the audience and they want to help and start doing some of this work, let's get to it because it is literally a community effort. It's an effort that we all share in, that we all tell stories and write stories and we all share like these are our primary things, or we all speak to people that are a part of these sort of networks and document them and
Mhm.
store them. And so building out these archives is a collective effort and one that I'm excited to do.
Yes, and again, necessary
And
work.
it's absolutely not, because otherwise they'll say it's no history.
And we know
Otherwise
that.
they'll say you don't exist. And even with the idea of when Margaret is born,
Hmm.
right? Like throughout documents, Margaret would sprinkle, oh, I was born in 1863, right? Or she'll come back and say I was born in 1861 and I was born in 18. Like there are so many different records of
Yeah.
her giving different stories of where she was born. And you have to make sense of what this means and what this is. But even that, this
Hmm.
idea that there is no record of me being born is wild,
It
right?
is.
It's something that is unfathomable. And so even thinking about that and thinking about having to build these records of these women,
Hmm.
um, that really starts off with word of mouth. It really starts off with a census record. That really
Hmm.
starts off with, we know you were born. Let's trace this back. Yeah, yeah.
Huh. Thinking about that, like, we live in this time and day
Mhm.
and whatnot. And so, like, we think of all the records that we have of our existence, like our
Mhm.
driver's license, our birth
Mhm.
certificates, our passports, all of
Mhm.
these things that we use regularly in
Mhm.
life.
Mhm.
And to think about someone not having access to those, first
Mhm.
and foremost,
Mhm.
but just kind of like still moving through life,
Yeah,
I am
yeah,
shook,
yeah.
absolutely shook, because that
Can't put
is
it
such
in
a
the
regular
system and say,
occurrence.
yeah, yeah. It's something that doesn't even go through like the logical brain set, right?
No,
And here, 100 years later, you're talking about like, but I don't understand why this is important. Why biography? Like, biography doesn't tell this larger story. And it's like, yeah, slavery. Yeah, it's
it's in there. It's all in
like,
there.
it's like,
Yes.
slavery. This is why we have to do this. Yeah.
Yes, I absolutely love this. Okay, so we have ooh, I love that. I love that. Ashlyn, who's also a great Tuskegee alum. Hey, Ashlyn, welcome. We're so happy that you came to see us. So she said she missed the first 30 minutes, but she asked this, can you please tell me when the recording will be released? The recording will be released most likely over this weekend. It is being recorded. We're going to download it and put it on our YouTube page. So I'll make sure to post that link and also send a follow-up email to everyone who's registered for the event as well. So y'all will have the link preferably by Tuesday. By Tuesday. And so her other question is, what part of Margaret Murray Washington's story resonated with you the most? And to go deeper, did it change your view of her in the aspect of respect, admiration, etc.?
It's so many. It's
I
so many.
love it.
Um, which one? Ah, okay. So, and I'll share this one because this is my latest one, right? So each time I get a story with Margaret, I'm always it's like reading something the first time without having anything to connect it to, and then you read it again and you're like, oh, and then you read it again, and then you read it again, and then you read it again. And so I think the latest one was she did a tour after Booker T. Washington's death,
Hmm.
the Chautauqua tour. And she did it in 1916. It was organized by Emmett Scott. And she's detailing to Emmett
Hmm.
everything that she did. And I remember the first time I read it, and I was just like, it'll fit in because when you're telling a life story, everything can't fit into the story, right?
Right.
Your a lived life is too much. It's a lot of things that are happening, right? And so it didn't make it into the book, but so I went back and I did an article on it. And one of the things that I was moved by, or that just really showed her humanity, because it's so easy sometimes to sort of see these women and like they're bigger than life because I
Hmm.
can wake up tired, right?
Every day. Every day.
And I'm thinking all of the things it's and you just list the clubs. And so sometimes I have to just stop and say, wait, she didn't just name it, right? She created it. She got people to join it. She kept it. She did the work. I mean, the without a phone, without internet, without text message, without a car, without a Metro Pass. And so this 1916 tour
Mhm.
that she did it by herself. And at first I was like, well, why would she do this tour by herself, right? It's 1916. It's not that safe. And so I think one of the things that I gathered from that trip that really changed was just her humanity of it. There was this one story within the incident where a white woman, age about 25, Margaret was guessing about her
Mhm.
age about 25, that stuck to her on the train. She didn't know the
Mhm.
woman, but
Mhm.
because she didn't know the woman, she didn't want to be identified with her, right? This
Okay.
respectability notion of not knowing who it is or what type
Mhm.
of danger it could possibly bring to her.
Yeah.
So one night in the trip, they stop and they tell them everyone has to get off because of some technical difficulties with the train. And
Okay.
so in that moment, they had to literally find somewhere to stay. And I'm about to tear up and they have to find somewhere to stay. And
Okay.
I'm just thinking, here she is. This is not a part of her route. This isn't a part of her stop. And
Mhm.
she has to find somewhere to stay. And she's the only Black woman. And this white woman has attached herself to her. And so she stops, they find a hotel. The
Mhm.
hotel says they're booked, they have one room. She writes her name down, Mrs. Booker T. Washington. The other lady writes her name right next to hers.
Mhm.
The guy takes her up to stairs, and Margaret is looking like, what is happening? And she says, oh, you guys have to share this room. And Margaret writes in her paper, oh, no, we're not. And then she says, but I had to stop and think for a moment and look around at my situation and say, okay. And I think in that moment, it became the human part of like, even in fear, right? Like they're doing these things and we're documenting these things. But
Mhm.
even in fear of life, I'm assessing whether or not I feel safe.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do it. Right. But just the vulnerability of it. And I think that that's probably one of the most recent ones in terms of just like stopping for a moment and
Mhm.
just thinking about like not all that they do, but what they have to give to do it. Yeah.
Wow.
It was scary. I was just like, oh my God. And she stayed up the whole night. She was like, she didn't go to sleep the entire night. She stood at the window until the sun came up. And then when the sun came up, she laid down for a few hours to get a little sleep. But she was up. I mean, just the fear and anxiety. And then the next day, she's back on the train. And there are other instances that she's writing that happened throughout this. Like one day, no one comes to get her. What?
Um,
I'm in Minnesota. No one's coming to get me. So anyway, but yeah, I think that's probably the most recent one where it was she is a woman. She is a girl, right? She is,
you just got. Oh
yeah,
my
it was
goodness.
a lot.
That that's terrifying to think of because I think even nowadays with all the connections that we
Yeah,
have to people, my husband has my location. So if
yeah,
something happens
absolutely.
to me, he
You're
gonna know
good.
where
Where
I'm
am I
at.
going? I'm here. I made it. I'm good. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Being in Minnesota, and that's far, y'all, real far and cold,
Yeah.
very cold.
Right.
If something happened or she were accused, how would anybody know? How
She's
would
the
anybody
only
get to her?
she's the only Black person there. And then the last thing, she doesn't see any Black people do her entire trip. She gets to the last stop, none, in her entire trip. And then she gets to the last stop, and it's three Black people in the audience. And she's telling the story, and she was like, the entire time I'm looking at them while I'm doing the presentation. And afterwards, they find me. But also that notion of like, not a lot changes, right? You're gonna find your people, right? And she found her people and they took her out to eat. She didn't bit more nor those people, right? But I mean, it was this instant connection and yeah. So it was a good overall story, but it was just like, oh, don't do that again, Margaret.
I love that. I love that
Yeah.
because again, history is one of the things that we always think is so far off.
Oh
But
yeah.
these are just people
Yeah.
living their everyday
Oh,
lives,
everyday
and some of
life.
the things that they do is remarkable.
Everyday
They get
life.
scared.
Yeah.
Yes, they get scared just like
She's
we get traveling
grieving,
around.
right? It's 1916. Her husband is gone. All of this stuff is happening at Tuskegee. Emmett isn't becoming the principal. It's a lot of things that are happening in her world, and she's by herself, right? And so, yeah, it was a lot.
I might have to join you with these tears
I
because,
know. I know.
boy,
Can't mess up my makeup.
understand, understand. Oh, so thinking about, okay, she's on, did you call this one the Chautauqua tour or is this,
This is
okay,
just
so perfect. That's my next connection. And that leads to our another question that we have. So during this tour,
Mhm.
um, we talked before it started. She had a particular engagement in let's see in what Tennessee
Memphis, Tennessee.
in Memphis, Tennessee.
Mhm.
We discovered that this engagement
Mhm.
Dr. Brown was also at.
Mhm.
Okay, so Dr. Brown was at this particular summit, like interracial conference and
Mhm.
everything, and she had a altercation on the train
Mhm.
beforehand, right? Where pretty much some white men bullied her into giving up her seat, and but there were others around. This did not happen in isolation. So at her speech, she mentioned to the crowd, predominantly white women, that this happened to her, and she was like, "Not near one of y'all said a mumbling word.
Mhm.
How we gonna work together? How is this going to go?" And laid into them people. And
Mhm.
they sat there and took it. So we
Mhm.
tell that story often in the museum because it speaks to how Dr. Brown was able to communicate with people, even sternly, and they still take notice of what she was doing.
Mhm.
So Margaret Murray Washington was also at that same
Mhm.
conference.
Mhm.
So okay, we're gonna do kind of two parts here. So I want you to tell us about her time at the conference,
Mhm.
and then Khadijah
Mhm.
has a great question, which Khadijah is our over at NC Freedom Park down in downtown Raleigh. So if you're in North Carolina, please make your way. She's amazing, gives amazing tours,
Mhm.
and the park itself, beautiful, phenomenal, and tells all about Black North Carolinians and their impact in the world. So Khadijah asks, can you share more about Dr. Brown's connection to Miss Washington and the role of mentorship in lives of club women? So we got kind of three
Mhm.
questions there.
Okay.
Margaret Murray Washington's time at Chautauqua on that particular Chautauqua tour, her connections with Dr. Brown, and the role of mentorship in the lives of club women.
Okay, so I'll say this. With the Chautauqua tour that she did was 1916,
Mhm.
but the Memphis event happened in 1920. And so
Okay,
the
okay.
way that it made it in was she's talking before these white women,
Mhm.
right? In this period after Booker T. Washington has already passed away. And so she goes to this event that the CIC is hosting in Memphis, Tennessee, and the CIC was established in 1919. And so by the time they're in Memphis, this is their first year, but they also had just come to just come to Tuskegee for a conference. So some of the women, some of these white women are at Tuskegee while the NACW is hosting a conference in Tuskegee. And so while they're there, they see this just amazing gathering of Black women doctors. And I mean, just anything that you can think of that someone could be was there. And so they invited a few to come to Memphis.
Mhm.
Brown is going to be one that goes to Memphis, and Washington is going to be another. And so the point of the organization was sort of to stop discrimination against Blacks within the South.
Okay.
And so they're getting sort of these Black women leaders who have been a part of these organizations to share with them what are some of the issues that Black folk are experiencing. And
Okay.
so initially, when I was reading Margaret's transcript of it, I was just like, Margaret has no chill. Like she's, and by 1920, she had been doing this for so long.
Mhm.
But when she gets to the podium, she literally is like, listen, we need A, B, and C. You have A, B, C, D, E, and F. All we're asking for is A, B, and C. And until
Mm.
you give it to us, she literally is like, we're not going to let up. And it's like literally everything that she says is like, we're not going to stop. We're going to be on your neck until you give it to us. And then to hear that Brown has a speech that's right before Margaret's speech. And she's also going in on them of like, if you want to help Black people in the South, control your husbands because your husbands are killing Black people in the South, right? And so it kind of gives this charge to these white women as to the sense of, don't come to me. You already know what the problem is, right? You see, you
Mm.
can read what the problem is every day. And
Mhm.
so it really was putting it back at them, right? In the sense of these Black women have been organizing and doing organizing for a long time. And anyone who does work, they know the difference between someone who wants to talk about a change and someone who wants to actually institute it. And so I think that at that conference, that was a challenge moment of like, yeah, you guys, it sounds good, but what are you actually going to do? And
Mhm.
are you coming to this place as though you don't know? Right. And so I think that they both have that kind of approach to it. In terms of mentorship, I think it's invaluable. It's one of those things within the women's club that was you had to have it. And so you see a number of women that are going to write each other. They would do like, what do you call it? A cold email or a
Uh-huh.
cold letter where you're
Yeah.
just sending a letter to try to get in on mentorship or get in on what is it that you did to be able to get your library staffed? What did you do to be? And so they're going to these clubs not just to dress up and put on their pretty hats, but
Hmm.
they're going to these club meetings to also be able to share resources in that way. Oh, I was able to get on to this person's thing. Let's do a fundraiser.
Yes.
Let's go here. And so you see these sort of connections, these letters, you see also the shade that's in the letters, right? So the women, they are collecting dues.
Hmm.
And they are getting their hair done, but they also are taking note of
Hmm.
those that they think are overspending, right? Or those that they think are not using resources wisely. And so
Mm.
it's all in the letters. And I'll say this, they're pretty stern. Like I feel like Margaret would hurt my feelings just the way she talks sometimes. Like,
They talk different back in those days.
they
Like,
talk very
yo.
different, right? And
Ooh.
it's no, did I hurt your feelings? It's you voted on this and I wasn't there. Therefore, I am not like respecting these results that came up. I told you I wasn't coming. So you should have done accordingly. Now that's Terrell. She really would get into people. But yeah, I think that these women, in order to even have the positions that they
Hmm.
had to be very stern in the ways in which they moved, but still in the very diplomatic kind of way.
Hmm.
Because even we know that with Brown,
Hmm.
there were things that she wanted to say no to, but
Hmm.
that she also understood sort of her precarious nature of where
Mm.
she was and who she's talking to. And so she understood that is it most important for me to say this truth? Or
Hmm.
for you to think what you're going to think and me just stand here and look at you, right? And so you see her sort of doing this as a way of sort of saying, but my kids need this and my kids need that,
Yeah.
right? And my kid, and so yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that kind of answered the question of mentorship, extremely important, the connection of the women at the clubs.
Hmm.
They're not in club work in terms of their weekly meetings together, but
Right.
they are connected in terms of the club work. And so they're writing letters, even though the letters aren't about going to a club meeting. It's about how do you do this at the institution? How does curriculum change at the institution? The professionalization of different fields. How does this work there? And just sharing this information in a very similar way that we share information today.
Yes, before their time. So
Mhm.
speaking of the the language was a little different. That's I was trying to find it. So we talked about this, Dr. Harris. Y'all,
Mhm.
Tanisha and I, who's our site manager, did a presentation at Elon University not so long ago. And Tanisha, in her section of the presentation, talked about the correspondence between one of Dr. Brown's besties, uh, Mary McLeod Bethune,
Mhm.
um, and some letters kind of between them. So two quotes stuck out to me about how there is that stern language, there's encouragement, there's sisterhood in this,
Mhm.
and so, that stern can kind of go for you, right? So one of the things that let's see, Dr. Brown has written to Bethune. Wait, no, I'm gonna go with the negative one first because
Mhm.
we want to end on the happy note because they spat, but then they got back together.
It's
All
almost like a
them
family. Like, all right, now let's go get some food, right? I'm
exactly.
thinking about Lean on Me, where he cussed him out. I'm the HNIC. Let's go get some food.
Come on, because that's how you show your love. That's how
Yeah.
you show your love. Getting the food.
Correction. I'm correcting you. And then let's go eat. Yeah.
We still build.
Yeah.
So Bethune writes to Dr. Brown at some point and says, I regret that you feel that the Southern woman did not receive you because of your Northern training. While they accepted me and boosted me to the top, that you represent the classes, while I represent the masses. I about laid out on that podium when she said that. I said, okay, yes, ma'am, put it
Okay.
together. But then Dr. Brown comes right back, and I'm not exactly sure of the sequence of these letters, but within over the course of their friendship, she says to Dr. Bethune, listen, darling, go slow.
Oh,
You
wait, that's a pause.
listen, darling, go slow. You are no longer young. To raise $1 million is a Herculean task, but if Bethune-Cookman is going to live after you, you must do it. So yeah, she little shade
Yeah, it's a
in
little,
the
it's
statement,
in there. It's yeah.
but I
It's
know
it.
you can do it.
Yeah, you ain't young no more, right?
But we gonna get this done.
We're gonna get it done. That's
Exactly.
a lot of money. But you can, if anyone can do it, it's you, right?
There we go. And that's what I love about the relationships that these women are having. And again, early 1900s,
Yeah,
mid 1900s, these are not the types of things that we think are happening
yeah.
in between these women, but their relationships are just like our
Just
relationships.
like it.
And it is just
Complicated. Yeah,
beautiful to see.
yeah. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay, so I think we have one last question again from Miss Ashlyn. Thank you for coming. Okay, so next question. Do you think that the marriage she had with Booker T. Washington was more business or intimate, especially considering that she became his widow and had to continue his legacy while grieving?
I'd say it's complicated.
Okay.
I would
Okay.
say they may have had different relationships, right? I would no, not like
You saw it happen in my brain all at one time.
they entered into marriage at very different places in life,
Okay, got
right?
it.
Here it is Margaret, who's
Mm-hmm.
older than him, and
Mm-hmm.
here it is Booker, who's been married, who started a school, been married twice, right? Who's traveled into different schools, who's
Yeah.
come back, who's done these things, who's gone back home, who left his hometown sweetheart and came back and got her. And I mean, he's had all these things, and Margaret has had romantic novels, right? And so one of the things that you kind of see in early letters is Margaret sort of wanting those romantic novels to be her reality, right?
Okay.
And so she's writing to Booker like, you haven't written to me. When you wrote to me, you didn't say these words, right? Like you didn't call me this or you didn't do. And so Booker will say, okay, did you get the letter I got that I sent you about Ernest's shoes? Because Ernest needs some shoes. Did you did you talk to Emmett? Because Emmett has a letter that he needs you to take. And so, but then he'll end it the way that she wanted him to end it, right? But he's like, and so I think it's complicated. I think that
Mhm.
later she kind of makes peace with it. And one
Okay.
of the ways that she kind of does that, you see her traveling with him more. And so when he's doing these trips, it's nope, I'll take a leave, right? Even
Okay.
to the point where she's taken 2 leave of absences from being lady principal.
Okay.
And so you have Bruce coming in and serving within those spaces, but you have her where she's like, I can't do it all. And I also want to be with you. You're going to Europe, we're going to Europe, right? You're going to this some we are going because Booker T. Washington could be gone for up to 6 months a year. That's an
Mm,
extremely long time, even in today's
very.
age with all of our forms of technology to be able to connect. And so I'll say, I think it was complicated. I think that the ways in which she wifed was
Mhm.
very different than probably the way that he husband, right?
Mm,
But they worked
they
together,
were.
literally. Like they worked well together. And so I would say that there was definitely love there. They definitely were intimate, right? And so and we know the ebbs and flows of it. And so
Yeah,
now if you ask me from Booker, now that's a different one. But from Margaret, that's my answer.
I love it. I love it. So their relationships were complicated.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
we love a good complicated relationship
Listen,
status on the Facebook. Yeah,
it
it's
was
in
listen,
there.
and so complicated. I really would be interesting. I just got to find some time to do like a historical novel to just be able to play with the complications of it, right? And to be able to just have the freedom of nuance to be able to just say, like, so yeah, maybe
Oh,
we'll
my
see.
goodness. I like so all this time I've also been kind of like writing out with some more connections because I know that there
Mhm,
are definitely
mhm,
connections or
mhm,
like similarities between
mhm.
Margaret Murray Washington and Dr. Brown,
Right.
Charlotte Hawkins Brown. So one of them being the marriage thing that just sparked the whole thing because Dr. Brown's first marriage was complicated. It's
Mhm,
where she got Brown from.
mhm. Isn't it two
Um,
years? Was it, how long was she married for?
Maybe it
Yeah,
if
not
it
even,
made it to
yeah,
two
that.
years.
Yeah, 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 exactly, exactly,
If it made it to two
exactly,
years, and this is
exactly.
where she got that Brown from, but then ended up, divorcing that husband, ended up marrying again, and
Mhm,
that relationship also did not work out and whatnot. And then she kind of washed her hands of the whole
mhm,
marriage thing. So it's almost like the relationship, even though like the idea of marriage was different. I think,
mhm,
especially for her first husband, for her and her first husband, their
mhm,
ideas of marriage were different.
mhm,
And so they ended differently,
mhm,
though, than Booker T and Margaret Murray, which is so interesting. So that's
mhm,
one of the places I saw some overlap. There is they both raised nieces. Um, yeah, they both raised nieces or nephews as well. Dr. Brown raised three of her nieces in her home in Canary Cottage. I did not know that about Margaret Murray Washington taking in other family members, but that beautiful. They both were members of Black sororities, which I thought was pretty cool. Dr. Brown being honorary AKA, Margaret
mhm,
Murray Washington being honorary Delta. I thought that was really cool and connection. And something again new that I did not know was about Margaret Murray Washington's involvement with the Mount Meigs Reformatory. Dr. Brown had a similar involvement with Eflin's Girls Home out in Eflin, North Carolina, about 45 minutes from our museum now. So it's really cool that they had that overlap. Now that's a new research point to be like, wait, did y'all talk about this in them letters? Because I
mhm.
need to know.
Need to know.
Need to know. Yes. So
Yeah.
that's not Dr. Brown, Lord, Dr. Harris. Do you have any extra, like, lasting remarks that you want to have before we close out our conversation for this evening?
I will just say, because I'm so long-winded that even my goodbye can be long, I'm just gonna say thank you.
No, Dr.
Thank
Harris.
you. Thank you. And it's so good to be in conversation. Literally, like this is love for me. Yeah.
Y'all, I did just like Dr. Harris just said, this is uh this is love. Like legitimately. Like I said before, Dr. Harris was one of my absolute favorite professors while I was at Tuskegee. And I saw a few Tuskegee people who we took classes with in the room. So thank you all so
Hey,
much for
you.
joining us. I'm going to throw up my final slide, which is just our contact information, and I'm gonna get through this quick little piece about how to stay connected with us. Before I do that, I do want to plug, we do have another virtual lecture coming up in September. And so I will include that information in you all's ending email. I'll be sure to do that. But I would like to share that it is from another former Tuskegee professor, Dr. Worth Hayes, some relation, some relation. I'll leave it at that. But we would love to have you all join us again there, and we will be talking about an entirely different woman, Doris. I'm blanking on last name, but who began the Hall Walton School, a very similar day school to Palmer Memorial Institute up in Chicago. So we're going to be learning about that a little bit later in September. So y'all, please join us for that. So here's my final remarks, and I promise I'm gonna turn y'all loose. We kept you a little long, but that's all right. We like to talk. Okay. Thank you again, Dr. Hayes, for joining us tonight. We appreciate your wealth of knowledge and for how you shared it with us. This is such proof, again, that history is the best subject ever, and especially when you know where to look for it. Thank you all, audience, for your attendance. And we're so grateful that you came, and we hope you learned something about the Black Women's Club movement of the early 1900s, Charlotte Hawkins Brown, and Margaret Murray Washington. If anyone attending or listening later is interested in learning more about Charlotte Hawkins Brown's museum's programs, tours, field trips, events, and more, please contact us via phone at 336-449-3310, via email at chb at dncr.nc.gov, or come by the Visitor Center at 6136 Burlington Road, Gibsonville, North Carolina 27249. You can also stay connected with us through social media. On Facebook, we are the Charlotte Hawkins Brown Museum and State Historic Site, and on Instagram, we are at CHB Museum. Have a great evening, everyone. And again, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate y'all. Please feel free to put your thank yous in the chat. Give a round of applause wherever you are for Dr. Harris. And we will see you all again very, very soon.
Yay.
Feel free to take a picture of this screen too. So do
Oh,
that.
oh.